If your mastiff comes charging in the room, so excited to see you, wants to jump on you, and you're holding your newborn baby. Like that just sounds really stressful, especially for the parents. So thinking about, can we come in on leash? Can we have some separation, maybe with some baby gates? You can keep that distance and still have positive associations being built.
VetFolio Voice listeners, hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode where we talked about a unique service within our industry that, I'll be honest, I did not know existed until this talk came about. For this talk, I was joined by registered veterinary technician Tiffany Johnson. And she's part of an organization known as Family Paws, whose goal is to increase safety and reduce stress in homes with young children and family dogs. Now, personally, I've introduced 2 babies to my dogs, as well as introduced new dogs into my home when I had toddlers. And in some cases, it went wonderfully, and in others, maybe, we had some bumps along the way. But in either case, I was trying to use the knowledge that I had to do the best I could. And when I considered that from the perspective of being a veterinarian, and in this industry we have more background in animal behavior than most, it really made me appreciate how challenging it must feel for new parents or parents who want to introduce a new dog to their young children to feel like they're doing the right thing and feel like they're maximizing the chances for success in that relationship. And also keeping in mind veterinary professionals who maybe aren't parents, but are asked, as many of us are, how to do this introduction successfully. And it can be hard to know if you're offering the right guidance to pet owners in that moment. I know I've certainly been asked my advice on introducing kids and dogs, and I do the best I can with the experience I've had. But to have some structured recommendations as well as a resource for those parents to reach out to and have someone who can work with them on a more structured and individual basis, it really kind of takes the pressure off. So let me go ahead and introduce Tiffany, and we'll learn more about Family Paws. Growing up on a farm and showing animals in 4-H sparked Tiffany's interest in pursuing a future as a veterinary technician. She graduated from the veterinary technology program at Brown Mackie College in 2015. Her technician career started at a mixed animal practice in Ohio, where she had the opportunity to work with both large and small animals. In 2018, she was introduced to the world of behavior and jumped right in. She's currently a technician at the Behavior Clinic in Ohio and is working toward the goal of becoming a veterinary technician specialist in behavior. Tiffany is Fear-Free Elite certified, along with being a certified training partner with Karen Pryor Academy and a member of the Fear-Free Speakers Bureau. She also recently went through the Family Paws program and is a licensed Family Paws parent educator. Tiffany lives in Cleveland with her husband and their beagle Gunner. Gunner was Tiffany's partner when she went through the Karen Pryor Academy course, and he continues to teach her something new every day when it comes to behavior. She enjoys reading in her free time, hiking through the metro parks, and is a huge Harry Potter fan. Her and I have that in common. Let's go ahead and learn more about Family Paws.
Nutrition is the cornerstone of our patients' health and happiness. The veterinary healthcare team should be the ultimate source for top-notch pet nutrition info. When clients see how the right diet helps their pets stay healthy and happy, they visit us more often. Remember, good nutrition is essential. It's smart business and great medicine. Enroll in the NAVC Pet Nutrition Coach certification today on vetfolio.com.
Well, I am joined for this episode by Tiffany Johnson, and we're going to talk about the Family Paws program, which I think is it's just a neat concept. So, Tiffany, first of all, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to dive into this. Can you tell us, what is Family Paws and what prompted you to become a part of Family Paws, a part of this program?
So Family Paws was created by a trainer in North Carolina. Her name's Jen Shryock, and she already had a background in working with kids and working with dogs. So she just decided, let's just combine them. And there's not really a lot of this information out there. And so she created a program to really support families who have kids and dogs. How do we live together safely? How can we still have our dogs as part of our family and day-to-day life? Because we didn't get dogs to just shove them in a room. When we have kids, we want them to be involved. And so we really just go through and provide that support for families. And I got interested in this program because I also love working with families and kids. I help out with the kids at my church. I was Cloverbud advisor for 4-H, so working with the little kids. So this was a really fun way for me to still use all of my behavior knowledge, but also kind of have that one-on-one time with families and get to know them and spend time with them as well.
I love that. I love that because you're right. There's not a lot of, kind of formalized information out there. And this is a really important topic. I think it's hard to kind of wrap our heads around what it will be like having our dogs and our kids together. And maybe I'm speaking just from my own personal perspective, but you always want to assume there's going to be this beautiful bond between the kids and the animals. And that's not always the case. And,
Right.
if you do run into some of those difficult situations, it can be hard to navigate those. So it's nice to have a resource there to kind of fall back on. You mentioned that this was a good way to really tap into your behavior knowledge and continue to use that in a way that it sounds like you're pretty passionate about. Can you tell us a little bit more? What is your background in behavior?
Yeah, so I'm a technician. I started working in a general practice. It was mixed animals, so large and small. And I've always had an interest in behavior. I feel like in tech school, you just get a teeny tiny amount of behavior and that's about it. So I was connected with the practice manager here at the behavior clinic where I work now, and she's become my mentor to I'm working on getting my specialization in behavior. So I'll actually be taking my test in October. So
Ah,
doing,
congratulations.
thank you. So doing all the studying now. I started out with doing puppy classes and happy visits at the clinic I worked at, and then moved up here and really dove into the world of behavior. So I think my eyes were really opened on all of the behavior problems that we can run into. And I went through the Karen Pryor Academy. I'm a certified training partner. So that's a 6-month long course to do. I've also gone through Fear Freeze. I'm elite certified with that as well. And like I said, I'm taking my test in October. So it's behavior is definitely a passion of mine because it's in general practice, you see so many times where maybe we focus more on the physical health of our patients, but the mental and emotional aspects just kind of get put to the side. And so that's something that's also really important to me is making sure that we're encouraging clients to advocate for their pets and educating other people in the field about behavior as well.
Absolutely. Maybe kind of leaning into our animals' natural behaviors and understanding how to work with their natural instincts, their natural behaviors to create this beautiful relationship that we're looking for instead of saying, well, I need you to be this, so why aren't you this? And that creating kind of a negative interaction. I feel like probably have to have a lot of patience with what you're describing to have that passion with behavior and working with kids and everything. That must be a real strong point for you.
Yes, yes. I think a lot of patience and I think also creativity as well. Because
Sure.
when you're working with different families, not every household is set up the same. Not every dog's the same. Not every kid's the same. So being able to kind of bounce around with some ideas of, okay, what's going to work for your family, your household, I think that's also super important.
Listening to you talk about really enjoying these behavior visits, these happy visits, and I'm kind of thinking about that from my own personal perspective. Could not agree more about the importance of making sure that we're addressing behavior. But when it comes to really getting down into the nitty-gritty and working in those areas, I mentioned patience. That's an area where I start to fall short. And it's kind of got me thinking, well, a lot of us in the field, we have different strengths in different areas. So having someone who can maybe, address the emergency that comes in, and somebody who really likes the long-term cases, and somebody with the patients to really walk through these behavioral things with families and do the follow-ups and things. It sounds like having a program like this and resources like you out there to say, this is not a strong point of mine. I know I can take you so far, but then I'm going to fall short. Let me lean into this program where there are people who are good at this and who are passionate and who are knowledgeable and can really take it the rest of the way would be important.
Absolutely. And I am all for, looking at each individual member and tapping into your stronger traits. And that's where, if you're working in a general practice and you love working with kids, you love working with dogs, I always encourage check out Family Paws website because you can become an educator. You don't have to be a trainer to be able to do that. You can simply just learn all of the things that you need to do through their program. And then there's also a separate program for veterinary professionals that's not as intense, but you still get good information because you're still going to be asked those questions. I know during those well visits, sometimes it comes up, oh, by the way, I'm pregnant and my dog doesn't like kids. What do I do? And so being able to have even just a little bit of knowledge to go, here's something to start you with. But I'm also going to kind of punt you over to some of these educators who can support you better. And I think it's great to be able to, if you know of any educators in your area, to kind of build that relationship to just be able to work together. They handle kind of the family dynamics and management, but then they can also come back to your clinic, like if medication needs added in or anything like that.
Right. And working together to create that plan for individual families because it can get, nuanced and complicated depending on how old are your kids or is this like, and I'm pregnant and I already have a dog, or I have kids, but I want to get a dog, and or I have
Mhm.
this crazy puppy who won't stop moving and I didn't expect this. How do I handle
Yes.
all this energy? That there's so many different questions that can come up. I like what you said there about kind of working as a team, where it sounds like Family Paws has a lot of resources to where, if I heard you correctly, I think you said there's a program for veterinary professionals where you're not becoming a Family Paws trainer, but you can get some of this information to be able to talk to clients about this. And then for those clients who need more, you can lean into the Family Paws trainers and work as a team for the behavioral aspect. And then, like you mentioned, medication. And then if you really are excited and passionate about it, then you can certainly become a trainer. Can you talk to us about kind of the process of becoming a trainer?
Yeah, so there is a program that you go through, and Jen, who started the program, she leads it. And she's really just breaking down kind of the two big classes that we do, kind of breaking down all of the little things that you would be going through. And then there's also you get one-on-one time to kind of bounce scenarios back and forth. You just really get to I like it because it's sort of open. They're really open to like, let's talk about these different situations you may run into. Let's talk about how to handle it and all of that good stuff. So I feel like it gives you some good, almost real life practice before you use that information in the clinic. I encourage if there's people who are maybe a little nervous working with those pieces because they're like, I just don't know that much about kids and all of that. This is still a really good program to get that information and help you feel more confident as well. I know there were a few in my class who were in that boat. They're like, I don't really do this often. I don't really know what I'm doing, but they're there to get the information. So I think it's really anybody who wants to do it, go for it. We need more of us.
Sure, sure. I think you make a really good point there that that might be just an area where you have no experience, no comfort level, and you're like, I don't even know what to tell people when they ask me this. And that can be a
Hmm.
reason in and of itself to go through, one of these information gathering types of programs.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, kind of along those lines, with what you're doing with Family Paws, I'm curious for, those of us out there who say, maybe it would be a good idea for me to get more information in this regard. What are some of the common questions that you do get asked when you're working?
Yeah, so one of them is, does carrying a doll around before the baby comes, is that helpful? And we usually talk about, the short answer is yes, but it's more so to make sure a few things. One, how does your dog respond when you're holding something? So, is your dog trying to jump up and check things out? Are they nervous because you're holding something? Because that lets us know, do we need to work on that ahead of time? But then we also like to see, can your dog respond to cues when your hands are full? Because what we find is a lot of dogs, even though we're giving a verbal cue, we're also doing hand signals. And so a lot of times they respond to the hand signal over the verbal. Well, if you're holding a baby, you can't also do all the things with your hands. So practicing with carrying something, and I usually say just take a pillowcase, 6 to 7 water bottles. So it's still something wobbly, something different. You don't have to go out and buy a baby, but practice. Okay, if I'm holding that and I'm standing, can you respond to a sit, a down, go to your bed? Same thing if I'm sitting down or laying down, because that's going to be helpful if we know ahead of time, oh, my dog can't respond to those things. We need to work on that before the baby comes. So I think that's definitely a big one. Also, bringing home the baby blanket is a huge one. I feel like I hear that all the time. Do I bring it home from the hospital before the baby comes? What do I do with that? And so my short answer is, it doesn't matter either way. So it's not a make or break. If you don't bring the blanket home, all bets are off. Your dog's going to hate the baby. It's going to be horrible. That's not the case. Sometimes I feel like it gives us sort of a false sense of security when we bring the blanket home, the dog sniffs it, and then we go, great, the dog smelled it, they know the baby, everything's going to be totally fine. And it sort of puts that expectation on our dog that they're going to be totally fine with the baby coming home because they smelled the blanket. And so I always tell people, you can bring the blanket home, but remember it's going to have those hospital smells on it too. So it's not just your baby, it's all those other weird smells. So if you bring it home, just set it out for them to sniff. Don't chase them around the house with it. Don't put it on their bed or put it near their food or their water or their toys. Because if they don't like the smells, I don't want them avoiding their own things because it smells weird. But I also talk about kind of going back to those, setting up that those expectations that our dog will be fine after they sniff it. I always ask people, well, if you have a new person coming over, say a friend coming over, you typically don't call them and say, hey, I need you to mail me some of your underwear for my dog to smell. So then that way they know you and they're totally fine. Like nobody does that.
Oh my
So
gosh, that would be such an awkward conversation.
right, right. And well, and every time I say it, I'm like, please don't anybody tell me that they do that because I don't know how I would handle that.
Right? Or don't go like start doing that. Well, like actually, that's a good idea. I have an aggressive dog. I'm going to start asking my friends for
Right?
their underpants.
Yeah, no, don't do that.
Ah.
But it's the same thing of bringing that blanket home and then just assuming, oh, my dog sniffs it and we're going to be totally fine. And that's another part of the Family Paws program, is we really focus on taking away those expectations that our dog is going to be fine with everything, because that's really unrealistic and I think unfair for us to put that on our dogs and go, yep, you're going to be fine with it, when it's a really hard transition for a lot of them. And it's hard for the parents, especially if you're new parents, it's going to be hard for you too. So if we can set everybody up for success before then, that's going to make it feel a lot better.
You make a lot of really good points, and I especially am relating to that. It's a hard transition. Thinking from my own perspective, I have two kids, and going from 0 kids to 1 kid was a hard transition for me. And from 1 kid to 2 kids was as well. A lot of things were changing. There was a lot I had to learn and adjust to and get used to. And it wasn't always, sunshine and roses and everything was perfect and wonderful. There were some challenges associated too. So why would we think that would be any different for our dogs? They're also going through a transition and maybe thinking of, I like kids a lot, but not everybody does. And, you have those friends who are like, oh, do you want to hold the baby? And they're like, nope, nope, sure don't. I'm good. I'm good
Right.
right over here. You just stay over there. I'm just happy to visit and make sure you're okay.
Yes.
Humans do this. So why would we expect that all dogs are gonna just transition just fine and be okay?
Absolutely. And I think, also thinking about introducing, because that's another common question I get is, well, when we bring the baby home, how do we go about that? And the first thing that I always tell them is I don't like to call it an introduction because, again, that sort of has that expectation of, okay, you've met, you've been introduced, we're going to be fine. And so I aim more for calling it a homecoming phase because it really is just an amount of time where your dog is just getting used to a new human in the house. And so I always encourage owners, there's so many different ways that you could go about this. Some people have their dog go to boarding while the baby's born. They bring the baby home, get settled, and then bring the dog home. Sometimes somebody stays at the house with the dog. And when we bring the baby home, maybe the dog goes outside and then it comes back in on leash. So, really, I really focus on what is everyone most comfortable with. So, this includes the dog and the parents. Because, especially if you have a larger dog and this is your first baby, you might feel uncomfortable if your mastiff comes charging in the room, so excited to see you, wants to jump on you, and you're holding your newborn baby. Like that just sounds really stressful, especially for the parents. So, thinking about, can we come in on leash? Can we have some separation, maybe with some baby gates? Because it's also, there's no set amount of time that, oh, your dog has to sniff your baby in X amount of days, or your dog's never going to be okay with the baby. There's no such thing. So I always encourage, you can keep that distance and still have positive associations being built. Have your dog work on a Kong or a lick mat while they're hanging out in the same room as the baby, because they're also, they can hear the baby, they can smell them from that distance. And I think that's something that parents sometimes forget about, is that the dog doesn't have to be right up on the baby to be able to smell them. They can, I mean, I can smell a poopy diaper from across the room. Your dog can absolutely smell all of the things across the room, but really just taking your time, and whatever you feel comfortable with is okay. If that is 3, 4 months of your dog not approaching your baby, that's okay. There's no pressure with that. And that's something that I really encourage, especially new parents, because I feel like there's already so much pressure for everything else. If I have to make sure that I do all these things for my kid, I don't want to add one other thing to your plate for you to be stressed about. But I always talk about, when the dog does come up to meet the baby, have them sniff the feet, or maybe, the legs, hind end, rather than up in the face. One, that just makes me nervous. I don't like dogs' faces being up by babies' faces. But then also, newborns have that startle reflex. So they may startle, may accidentally hit the dog. That could upset the dog. And so, really, to just avoid that, kind of aim for the feet and hind end area.
That's good advice. When my first daughter came home, it wasn't me who introduced our daughter to our dog. It was my husband. I think I was asleep in the other room, and a super docile dog, like would never hurt a fly. But I remember he like let her sniff my daughter, and she was all excited, and he said she just like licked her whole face, like tongue over entire face, and he was like, "Oh no, I don't know if I was supposed to do that." And And then my daughter just started giggling and everything was fine. But I remember him
Hmm.
telling me the story where he was like, her whole face, like, he's like, is that okay? I'm like, I guess so. It's gonna have to be.
Right, right. It already happened. So here we
Right.
are.
Oh, yes, yes. And they were best friends for quite a long time.
Oh,
Uh,
good.
I guess one of the things that I worry about in that transition, that homecoming phase, which I think is a great word for it, is maybe parents, pet owners not picking up on the body language that says, I'm not okay, I'm uncomfortable. So, can you give us just kind of a review of canine body language? Many of us in the veterinary profession, we're familiar with canine body language, but maybe some good talking points for pet owners to say if you see these types of cues, that's kind of your indication that your pet's not okay and to back up and go a little bit slower.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is definitely one of the top things that I make sure to go over with all of my clients is making sure we can read that body language because I talk to them and go, this is the only way that Fluffy can tell you how they're feeling. So we really need to hone in on it and know what he's saying. And one great resource that I give to every family that I talk to is the book called Doggy Language by Lily Chin. There's also a feline version too, but that one has fantastic pictures in it to just break down all of the pieces and parts of the body language, what it means, all of that good stuff. It's great for kids, especially as they get older. Let's teach them how to read the body language as well. So that's the other part of Family Paws is we want to create dog aware generations. So not only setting our dog up for success, but setting our kids up for success, teaching them body language, how to interact with dogs appropriately, so they can stay safe not only in the home, but if they go to the park or a friend's house or things like that. And then the goal would be they teach their kids and really just creating those generations. But some of the big things that I talk about when it comes to body language, I feel like a lot of people are good at picking up on, okay, we got a growl, a snap, a lunge. We all know that's a big no, thank you, not comfortable. But sometimes we can miss more of the subtle changes in the body language that happen before that. And so I talk to clients about, I think of those as polite no thank yous or whispers of just going, ooh, no, don't like this. And so this can be maybe we're weight shifting away from the child, we're turning our head away. We can have furrowed eyebrows, so kind of the worried look. Maybe we get a bit more stiff and tense through our face and our body. The tail might go down. And then I also talk about some displacement behaviors. So things like yawning, lip licking, doing that wet dog shake off, even a paw lift. So some clients can get that confused with, oh, my dog wants to shake with you, especially if they know that behavior. But if that paw lift is paired with, I'm weight shifting away, I'm looking away from you, my eyes are really big, that paw lift is more, I'm really uncomfortable with what's happening. And so we can see a lot of that happen before we escalate to growling, lunging, biting. And so I always tell clients if we miss those whispers, those polite no thank yous, or if we just keep pushing through, our dog's going to go, well, you didn't hear me, so I need to start yelling. I need to do more things to get you to understand that I'm just not comfortable. And so I always encourage, and it's helpful when you have that homecoming phase, if especially when everybody is coming into the room for the first time, having one adult managing the dog, one adult watching the baby, so that you can have full focus on how is my dog feeling.
So many good points there that I think are just critical and good reminders. I love what you said about dog aware generations because that is something that makes my eye twitch. Just in general, is when you see these dogs acting, politely saying, no, I'm not comfortable. Please take me out of this situation. And then they get in trouble for snapping or growling, and the
Mhm.
dog is the bad guy. And it's like, well, what did they do to try to tell us that? And so
Right.
hopefully, if you're talking to parents about this in the homecoming phase, then that'll allow them to also work with their kids when they become toddlers to say, hey, that's not, do you want the dog to do that? Do you want someone to do that to you? Do you see these behaviors where this dog is telling you that he's uncomfortable and you need to back up a little bit and
Mhm.
stop some of these escalating situations that can happen if we do just push through.
Absolutely.
Uh, so yes, so many good points there, and I think that just really setting everybody up for success in the long term. And I think you addressed a lot of this in your answer, in your previous answer, but I'm curious because one of the communication challenges I find when I'm having these conversations with pet owners is just how nuanced each situation is. You have different dogs, you have kids of different ages, you have pet owners with different values of who their dog is in their household. And how to communicate that in a way that kind of tailors to each individual situation. So I'm curious how you approach those nuances in each situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I run into that often, especially in the dogs and toddlers class that I do. We talk about keeping distance and all of that, but I'll have some parents go, but the problem is my dog is too obsessed with my child and wants to be all over them, knocking them down, all of that. And so that definitely looks a little bit different than, oh, my dog is stressed and anxious and trying to hide. So I still definitely go over body language because that's going to be the same regardless. It just may be your dog's telling you something a little bit different. And I think that's also super important to bring up body language because sometimes owners will feel that their dog is excited and happy. But when we really look at the body language, it turns out sometimes they're a bit more conflicted and they want to be around the parents. They want to be around their owners because they're super attached to them, but they feel a little bit nervous about the child. And so we can have some conflict there. So I think being able to talk about that is important. But some of the general things that I go over is talking about supervision. So with Family Paws, there's different levels of what supervision can look like. So starting at kind of the very bottom of absent supervision, where we want to avoid that because that's just leaving baby and dog in the room by themselves, no adults there, going all the way up to what does really that top tier gold star supervision look like. And then also, I like to talk about proximity. So, if you know that your dog is stressed, how can we help manage the distance between the child and the dog? And thinking about what are your dog's sensitivities? What are those triggers? So, this can be things that make your dog anxious or things that make them really excited. So, for example, balls. There are some dogs that are just, they go bananas over a ball, and if that's your dog, great, they can still have playtime with the ball, but maybe we do some separation if your toddler is also playing with the ball so they don't get bulldozed over because your dog's just so excited. And I also think if we know those sensitivities of our dogs, we can help set them up for success, but it can also explain some of their reactions to things. So, for example, if you have a dog that is reactive to flashing lights, so they bark and chase after them, and your dog has been totally fine with your kid, newborn up to toddler stage. And then we get those shoes with the flashing lights that
Oh,
just drive me crazy when it comes to dogs. And so your toddler's running around with their super cool new shoes, and your dog barks and chases after them. Well, that's super scary because you're like, my dog has been totally fine. What's happening? It must hate my child. But if we can go back and go, remember, your dog does this with flashing lights, that can just help ease a lot of stress and tension of going, oh, my dog wasn't trying to eat my child. It's just reactive to that trigger. So I think having owners just kind of list some of those things is really helpful. And then I also talk about practicing with some separation. And so this doesn't have to be shove them in a room, shut the door, but can we practice, have some baby gates up? They're on one side with some food enrichment, you're on the other side with the child. So they're still there, they're still hanging out, but we've got a physical barrier, especially if they're a bit more nervous. And then we can also practice with separation without a barrier. So there's some dogs that cannot handle being on the other side of a gate or a door if you're present, my dog included. And I work in behavior, so I get it. But maybe we can have them station on their bed and hang out at a distance, especially if they're a bit uncomfortable, but they're still part of the family. So, kind of starting with those general recommendations. And then there's always the option to send them to Family Paws, the website. And there's a spot where they can find an educator in their area. And even if there's not somebody in their area, a lot of us do virtual consults and appointments. I know I do those a lot. And that can actually sometimes be more beneficial than in person because then we can see the setup of the house. They can kind of take us on a tour and show us where everything's at. We can talk about, oh, let's put a gate here, or let's move the food and water dish to this spot, and really just help kind of set everything up and help things feel better as well.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about kind of the separation and I love that you emphasize that that's okay to have that separation because sometimes it's just as much that we need the dog to be separated so that their stress can be minimal because just like you have that dog that might be too excited and obsessed with your child and want to run up and lick them and do all this stuff, it may go the other way where a child is really obsessed with the dog and the dog kind of needs that barrier to feel comfortable and feel safe and then they can form that bond a little more comfortably. I'm also laughing a little bit to myself about because I didn't even think about what you said about dogs not necessarily responding to verbal cues but more to hand signals. Because
Mm-hmm.
as we're sitting here recording this, I have my puppy here with me who I don't trust her at all. And she moved out from under my desk, and I was sitting here like snapping my fingers to the side to get her to come back to me. So I knew she wasn't doing anything terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, yeah, I didn't really think about it that it's not, she will come to the word come, but there's so many more signals that go into that.
Yes, yeah. And with dogs in general, they do tend to pick up on our body language first over the verbal cues. So that's why I think it's so important to test it before you actually need it. One of the things that we teach a lot is a hand target. So having your dog come over, touch their nose to your hand, just a nice way to move them around. But again, if you got your hands full with the baby, you can't do that. So I did have one client, they changed it to if they put their foot out, their dog would come over and touch her nose to their foot. I was like, this is fantastic. So that's where I think some of that creativity comes in of how can we still use these cues, but maybe in a different way when we have a newborn.
That's what's so neat about behavior is there's just so many subtleties we don't even pick up on day to day,
Mm-hmm.
minute to minute. And then when you really break them down in terms of the science and what we're really seeing, there's so much that goes into these individual behaviors.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, I know you've talked about these resources a little bit already for those of us who want to learn more and are also fascinated by the subtleties in behavior and all that goes into it. Can you just summarize and remind us of what resources are out there for veterinary professionals who want to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Family Paws website, it's just familypaws.com. That's going to be the biggest resource where you can look up information about becoming an educator yourself, looking up information for that specific program that's geared towards veterinary professionals. There's also a lot of great resources on there, blogs, handouts, all sorts of things that you can either have to give to clients or just direct clients to that website. Family Paws also has a YouTube page and a Facebook page. So being on those, directing clients to those is really helpful. I also really like Postpartum Support International. That's a website to be able to give to clients of just really good resource for that postpartum period. And that's something that I always encourage clients of having a support system once baby is there. So whether that is setting up for somebody to come walk the dog, setting up for groceries to be delivered, really just having, friends, families, neighbors, whatever it is that you need to just help support you, especially if you're a new parent, but I mean, even if this is your fourth, fifth kid, you still need that support system once that baby's there. And so that's a good resource. And I also talk about there's so many groups on Facebook for in your area local mom groups or dad groups and things like that. So I think the more that you can encourage clients to build that, I think that's also going to be really helpful. And then of course that doggy language book, that's my favorite. There's another book, How to Live with Kids and Dogs Without Losing Your Mind by Colleen Pilar. I think I said that right, hopefully. But that is a really good resource for clients to be able to learn more about body language, knowing how to manage kids and dogs when they're together, especially if you have clients that like to read. That's a fantastic one. And it's a super short book. So it's not like they're buying a whole textbook or anything. But I think if any practices have, like we have a little library here of different books and stuff. So if any practices have that, I'd recommend adding that to your library. So then it's a good thing. You just grab it quick and show it to the clients of, hey, this is something that would be beneficial as well.
Yes. And anyone who has lived with kids and dogs knows how fitting that title is. Well, Tiffany, this has been such a great chat. I feel like I have learned a lot, been reminded a lot about some of the things that are so easy to overlook in behavior. So thank you so much for joining me and for all of the great information. Are there any final thoughts you want to share as we kind of wrap up here?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I think it's so important to get this information out there. And I think the only other thing is we also do webinars we have a dog and storks and then a dog and toddlers. So dogs and storks is really prepping for a baby to come, and then dogs and toddlers is prepping for that toddler stage. So once we get out of the, okay, I'm a newborn little baby potato, not doing anything, and now I'm up and moving around, how does all of that look when it comes to management? Because it's way different managing a 2 to 3 year old tearing around the house versus a little potato that's not doing anything. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we talked about the shoes flashing lights, but with 2 to 3 year olds, everything flashes lights.
right.
Oh, well, Tiffany, thank you again. This has been a lot of fun.
Yes, thank you so much.
Tiffany, thank you so much for taking the time to join me and teach us more about Family Paws. I mean, what a cool resource for veterinary professionals when we're being asked to weigh in on these types of relationships. A big thank you to everyone who joined us. I hope you enjoyed this episode and you're excited about learning about this resource to help navigate these conversations successfully. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. It'll help other veterinary professionals like you find this and other great content we try to put out there. For more episodes like this, click on the Education tab on the VetFolio website. As always, we'd love to hear your input on this topic as well as ideas for topics you'd like to hear from us in the future. Feel free to reach out to me at dvm@vetfolio.com. You can also visit my Facebook page at Dr. Cassie DVM, and you can find me on LinkedIn. And remember, if one animal is better off because of you today, it's a great day.